I think this is all wrong. Just kidding. Bad joke, sorry.
Okay, great.
We started.
Okay, great. So sharing the screen. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Really appreciate you either, staying up late at night, waking up early in the morning, or, perhaps stopping your dinner hour, depending on where you are. So today we will talk about developing goals. And if anyone can't see the screen, just, let me know. But we'll talk about how to develop your goals, and also, do the goals really matter? So my name is Scott Edinburgh. For those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I'm the founder of Personal MBA Coach, and I'm joined by MJ Shores, who's a former Wharton and UCLA admissions director from our team. So we'll be chatting through today. If this is the first time that you're joining these live streams, the way the technology works is you can ask questions throughout the time, and we'll see them at the end. We don't see questions during the session, but we'll certainly take plenty of time to answer them at the end. And please remember to like things or don't like things, throughout the process, and subscribe to the GMAT Club channel. So a little bit of background about myself. I went to MIT for undergrad, studied economics and business at Sloan. I was a teaching assistant for one of the MBA courses as an undergrad, and I worked at Deloitte in consulting for a few years, management consulting, mostly mergers and acquisitions. Then I actually went to Wharton for my MBA.
Scott, sorry to interrupt. Your presentation is still not shared.
Oh, it's not? Okay.
No.
So it says sharing a window. Let me see. I'll try to share screen again. Maybe I'll try to share the window itself and not the whole. Try this again. Apologies. Application window. Okay. Does this work now?
1 second. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Now it's good. Thank you.
Apologies. Don't fire me. Okay. So you didn't miss anything. But, as I was saying, I went to Wharton for my MBA, and I picked Wharton because when I was in high school, I actually took a couple summers of economics classes at Wharton. Really liked the curriculum. Wanted to go back for the MBA to study real estate. So, went there, had a great time, founded Personal MBA Coach. As a student, I was helping my best friend with his applications. He worked with another firm, had a bit more of a standard process. Long story short, redid his stuff. He ultimately got into Harvard, helped another friend get into Harvard, then Wharton, and the list kind of goes on. So now 13 years later, I'm on the board of directors for the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants, which is a group of 7 board members globally. We do a lot of things with admissions directors. There's an annual conference each summer with heads of admissions. We'll even do like a mock evaluation session where we'll analyze profiles and determine who should get accepted and rejected and why. Last year, 96% of our folks got in. It's actually a little bit higher than 96%, and that was closer to around 6 million in scholarships. So a little bit about what we do here, and then this is the last slide about us, then we'll get into the goals for today. So we provide comprehensive GMAT, GRE, and executive assessment tutoring. We have some of the best tutors in the industry, in-house software that we use to drive through the tutoring sessions. We are helping people through all the different parts of the process, from like early planning. If you are, just getting started, you're thinking about applying to school, maybe not now, but in a future year, we help you to think through how to perfect your profile between now and when you're ready to apply. What are all the key things that you should be doing? We have former M7 and top 10 admissions directors on our team, as well as interviewers, and then also a little kind of client network at all the top schools. So that's a little bit about my background. I'll let MJ introduce herself for a minute, and then we'll go on to talk about goals.
Hello, everyone. I have undergraduate degrees in economics and history, graduating summa cum laude, Phi Beta Kappa. I taught at a business school in Russia, taught undergrads and MBAs for a couple of years, taught organizational behavior, international trade, and negotiations. And then I headed up admissions for the Wharton School and for UCLA. So in those roles, I have read many, many thousands of applications, interviewed thousands of people. So I'm intimately familiar with the admissions process. I still have a lot of colleagues in the industry. I was very active in GMAT, the General Management Admissions Council. And so I'm just happy to be here today, and as is Scott, and to answer any questions you have once we go through this deck.
Great. Thank you. So first, do goals really matter? You know, this is a question we get often. I started 2 clients today, and honestly, neither of them knew what they wanted to do post-MBA. And I said, that's fine. You know, we can figure this out together. So, you know, do goals matter? Short answer is yes, right? And this is kind of a few picture here, but yes, goals do matter. The reason they matter, well, I guess there are a few reasons, right? One reason is if you project an image to admissions directors that shows you really know what you're doing, or you think you know what you're going to be doing, it gives them confidence that you will be able to enact a plan once you're in school. You don't have to write down everything that you will actually do post-MBA, but you have to give a reasonable prediction for what that might be. Alternatively, if you come to campus and you try to sell a story that says, I don't know what I'm going to do, I'm looking for you to help me with that, and I want to find myself in business school, it doesn't show the confidence, it doesn't show the planning. And then people that do have at least some sort of plan, end up doing a little bit better once they come on campus. So why do goals matter? All of a few reasons, and then I'll ask MJ to kind of add in here a little bit as well. So schools want successful graduates, right? At the end of the day, a business school is measured by the success of its students and graduates. That's one measure. And if you have a really good plan, and an admissions director will know that you will succeed in this plan because it makes a lot of sense and you've thought through it. You've talked to other folks in the industry. You've talked with your own company. You've met with alumni and current students, and it seems like this is a plan that really makes sense. You will most likely, or more likely, be successful. And your goals also set up why you want the MBA, right? So if you know what you want to get out of the post-MBA job, even if you don't end up getting that job, you're more likely to get a lot out of the business school experience. And so the more planning that you do ahead of time, the better you actually, succeed in the program. And they also show a little bit about your passion. Now we say uniqueness here. This doesn't mean you need a unique goal, but if you're able to convince someone that you have a plan, it shows a little bit about your passion. MJ, what are some other reasons why you're interested in goals when you're evaluating applications?
Well, I think one of the areas you alluded to is that your MBA experience actually goes by very quickly. 2 years is a very fast time, believe it or not. And if you really don't have a sense of your goals, you'll be directionless, and you'll find that your experience is not as positive as if you'd had a really strong, clear focus. Then you may get lost in the shuffle. You may be taking some courses in one concentration and then some in another. And then you find that when you're interviewing for jobs, you're not fully prepared. And then you wonder about the investment because the ROI is a little less than if you're actually focused coming in. You may change your goals a little bit after you're there. You may refine them. You may even find a little bit of a new passion, but the ability to be focused up front and have goals says a lot about your ability to succeed once you graduate.
Great. Now, one other question, MJ, as you're looking through applications, how many for any given applicant? That was just kind of ad hoc question, but I know we've talked about this before. For any given applicant, how many different plans could there be? Some people come to us and they say, is there one plan for me? Like, how do I know what the right path is? How would you advise someone with that kind of a question?
Oh, that takes a lot of soul searching. And a lot of it is finding goals that kind of make sense with your background. Like if you've never done finance and you suddenly think you're going to become an investment banker on Wall Street after an MBA, that's probably not very realistic. Unless, of course, maybe you're a gambler in Las Vegas and because your math background, you're really good at it over a period of time. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So certainly many different goals for each applicant, but it still has to make sense. The other thing to think about is some schools are more interested in goals than others, right? And if you start to look through the applications and you start to read some of the essays, albeit essay questions could change this year, although we're not envisioning a ton of change, you might find a school that asks about a goal, or you might find a school that does not ask about a goal. Definitely pay attention to the question. I know we're not talking about essays today, but I always get somewhat off track here. If a school doesn't ask about your post-MBA goals, don't write about them. If they ask about a time when you failed, write about a time when you failed. If they ask about a leadership experience, write about that leadership experience. Don't try to tie it back to the school and why you want to get the MBA. There was a lot of debate last year among one of the M7 schools that didn't ask about goals in their main questions. And some people really wanted to write about the goals, and we didn't allow anyone to do that, because they didn't ask about that on purpose. So certain schools are moving away from asking about goals. It's not necessarily that they're not important. It's just that they're not looking for that in the application. And so it might not be the most important thing for them. And then often in an interview is when a school would evaluate your goals and your plan. If you think about it, if you're sitting on video, because that's probably how we'll be interviewing for schools, and someone is testing you and asking you questions about your goals, it's a lot better way to evaluate someone versus seeing an essay that they know you've spent weeks or months on. You've probably got some help from consultants or friends. It's much better to ask you about something else and then sit down in an interview and then really kind of test you live. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind.
Yeah, Scott?
Please.
One thing I was going to say is that the questions that schools ask you can be really good insights into their culture, because those arise out of what they value in candidates and what they're trying to build in their community. Because people often wonder, what is hype on the website and what can I really trust? And these emerge out of long discussions that the admissions committee have, even with faculty sometimes. So they're really good clues about the culture. So I would make sure to pay attention to that as well.
Great, thank you. So, as you think about career goals, funny enough, don't overthink them. Most goals can get you accepted. Of course, not all. MJ gave an example earlier of one that, might not be great for everyone to write, but at least many goals, if not most goals, can get you accepted. A lot of it is around how you spin it, what you're doing between now and when you apply to convince someone that you can actually go and accomplish these goals. Also, simpler goals are better than the complicated ones. And I'll say it again, simpler goals are better than complicated ones. Often applicants come to us and they say, I want a, quote, unique goal. I want to stand out. And I always reply, why? Why is that something that you want? Because I don't want you to do that. I want you to write a goal that's going to be really easy to read. If we're reading 8 applications in an afternoon and throwing out a random number, maybe it's not that number, I don't want to have to stop and pause and think, I wonder if this person can actually accomplish this. I want it to be really easy to make it seem like that they can do it. Now, that doesn't mean you want to go back to your same role at the same company and do the exact same job. But if you're, doing well at your company and your boss is willing to write in a rec letter that they would love to bring you back, maybe they'll even pay for the MBA, maybe they won't, you can certainly go back in a post-MBA role, and that's completely fine. One of the shortest goals conversations I've ever had with a client was one of my favorite clients from London, and he worked at Bain. And I said, so let's talk about your goals. Let's have a conversation about your goals. And he said, yeah, I'm coming back to Bain, and then I'll be a partner long term. And that was it. That was the entire conversation. He did extremely well, got into his top choice school. There was not a large strategy. It was Bain was sponsoring him. He wanted to go back to do consulting, and that's what he wanted to do in the long term. So as you think about writing a strong goal statement, there are a few things that you should consider. One is to be decisive. You want to have a set of goals and you want to run with them. Again, as MJ mentioned before, this is a way to make sure that you can actually succeed in the classroom. You have a plan. You know what you're going to do to take advantage of things on campus. So whatever you decide to do, just be decisive with your goals. Try not to say, I want to do 1, 2, or 3, and I'll figure it out at the school. Certain schools might be okay with, 2 different paths if they're somewhat related, but all else fails if you're not sure for the school you're applying to. Just try to be decisive. Also, really, as mentioned before, try not to find yourself in business school. In reality, you you may do this, right? So, plenty of leading entrepreneurs don't necessarily write that they would start a business in their applications, and they might do it anyway. But ideally, you're not projecting an image to an admissions team that you really want to find yourself in school, as much as you have a plan and you know what you want to do. And then no one's going to hold you to your goal statement. So there's no measure of how many people actually do what they write when they apply. The one thing I will say is some schools do look at the goals as a way to plan for the class support. So one school, Dartmouth Tuck, actually takes the industries and functions that, well, more so the industries that people are interested in, and they try to staff up their career services accordingly. So if all of a sudden one year you have 60% of the class that wants to do consulting, which might not get that high anyway, but let's say that, then they would make sure to have that proportional number of career services folks to help them in the job. So it's another reason to try to be genuine with your goals. MJ, anything to add on being decisive here?
Yeah, and I also think that, when admissions officers are creating the class, they talk about crafting a class, and crafting it is based on a diversity of not just, geographic areas, academic performance as an undergrad, but they're also looking at career areas. There is a belief that the learning environment is enhanced by a multiplicity of professional backgrounds. So they're also looking at that as well.
Great. So next is be consistent. Your goals should be your goals. They shouldn't vary from school to school. Sometimes we get questions, well, Kellogg is a marketing school, Wharton's the finance school. And I might do entrepreneurship at MIT, so let's have these 3 goals. And I say, no, let's have one plan for you. The most important reason, forget about whatever else is written on this slide, most important reason is you want things to be easy for you. You might interview with 3 schools in 1 week. You have 3 different goals. It's going to be very complicated to practice for your interviews. At Personal MBA Coach, we're actually doing the group mock interview right now. One of our Wharton former interviewers is doing a group mock interview for round 3 with folks. And during the small one-on-one portion that happens after the group session, there might be a question on goals. You might have to have a quick 30, 60-second answer. And so you want that to be easy in your mind. You'll do enough rehearsing and kind of practicing across schools. Also, even if let's say you say, okay, Scott, great, I can still do that, right? I can perfect this, and you won't know it. I'll be able to answer the best goal. So let's still write about finance for the quote finance school. You might lose a little bit of credibility if you do that. Schools know what they're quote known for, and I'll tell you, if everyone applying to Kellogg says that they want to do marketing or consulting, as MJ mentioned, they probably won't all get accepted because they do want a diverse class. So it's better off to be yourself, as long as there's some history of a school being able to place you in that role. So you might not want to, write such a random goal that the school really won't be able to help you achieve. Even if, a school is placing 3% of their class in the industry that you want to go to, maybe that means there's not a lot of competition and you can actually get those jobs. So there are certain schools, like take investment banking, for instance, there are certain schools like UCLA that might not be the most well-known for investment banking, but guess what? They have more investment banking job offers in most years than students that want to actually, take those jobs. And so if you go there and you want to do investment banking, you might not be in the majority of the class, but guess what? You're more likely to get a job than perhaps at some other programs. And also, if the goals aren't genuine, it's just hard to show passion. You're sitting in an interview, you're talking to someone. At the end of the day, tell them what you want to do. If all else fails, and you say, look, I don't really know what I want to do, you tell me and I'll decide that that's what I want to do, then I would go back to what you're familiar with. So, have a goal that in some ways kind of relates to something that you've done in the past so that you can talk about it and answer some questions. So next, your career goals should be ambitious but attainable. Titles are not that important, and actually, I'll let MJ talk about titles in a minute from the missions perspective. But from my perspective, titles are not all that important because certain schools, or rather certain companies, have higher titles than others. but you're probably not going to be running an entire department on day one after the MBA. So sometimes if we see someone who says, I want to be a director of marketing at Fortune 500 company, I might say, well, that might be a little bit ambitious for post MBA, especially if you're just 27 years old. Let's talk about like an assistant brand manager, perhaps, or marketing manager, and then in the long term you can rise up and have a higher level role. Figure out what's realistic for you. Whenever we have goals discussions, and the first thing that we do with all clients is have a brainstorming session. In that session, we go over their passions, hobbies, challenges, struggles. We talk through all the key points about them that we want to highlight in the process. And part of that discussion is a goals discussion. And let's say we're talking about a really, really niche industry, and someone says, does this seem realistic? I might throw the question back at them and say, do you think you can do that? How confident are you? And based on that answer, that sometimes drives what we want to do. Because if you can't convince yourself, then you're probably not going to convince someone else. And the other thing to think about is, look at the career postings from your companies and your target industries, and see what they're looking for. You can also look at schools and see their career reports to see what industries and functions people are going into. But if you're not sure what the actual job title is, go on Merck's website or Pfizer or Coca-Cola, whatever company you might want to apply to, and see what kind of jobs there are and what jobs are post MBA. MJ, anything to add here?
I agree with you on the titles not really being important, and they're not level across organizations. Like I have a friend who's a senior manager at Ingram Micro. Well, that position has a lot more responsibility than some people are VPs at smaller firms. And so we're not really looking, when we evaluate applicants, for the exact title as much as, is the MBA going to help them and maybe accelerate their career, reach a little higher? And that will differ for everybody. And there's no one size fits all for any MBA grad. So I agree with you, Scott. I think if you want to show that you're passionate, you don't need to say you're passionate, because that's not very persuasive. It's more you're showing that you've really thought through something and you're really excited about it. And that will come across in the discussion without your having to use those words.
Great. Thank you. So next, consider logical career pathing. What we mean by this is set out an ambitious path, and long-term goal for yourself. Think about what is realistic for you. Goals should flow logically, meaning if let's say you're an engineer. We work with a lot of engineers. We're an engineer. We're creating products, but someone tells us what to create. Then we're going to go in and create it. And you said, look, after 5 years of coding or designing things, I'm sick of doing that. I want to be on the front line, so to speak, to think about what types of products should we be creating, or how do I really manage products? Well, maybe then something like product management could be logical. And then if you are a product manager at a company for a few years, what's next? You could be head of product, you could be lead product manager, you could focus on innovation. Think about what might make sense and what is a logical path for you. If you're not sure, talk to students, talk to graduates. But one thing we often do in our first conversations with folks is kind of course correct a bit. Maybe the short-term and long-term goals are not as related, and we have to come in there and say, I can see that long-term path, but you kind of have to pick, are we going for the short-term path or the long-term path? And if we pick one, then we might have to adjust course for the other one, again, so that the path is logical. How much does that matter as you're evaluating an application, MJ? How the connection to, or rather, let me rephrase it. What's more important, the connection from your current job to short-term, or the connection from short-term to long-term?
I think they're both important, but I can tell you, based on my experience, where a lot of applicants fall short is the connection between the short-term and long-term. So the short-term is often very realistic, very practical, and the long-term can be wildly motivational, aspirational, but there's no connection to anything in their past. And like, oh, well, I want to run my own foundation one day. and then you look at the applicant and you don't see any track record of involvement in extracurricular activities or anything that would lead you to believe that that's a really practical, actual goal they have. If you can connect what you're doing in the short term to what you want to do in the long term, even if it's loosely connected, that will really help.
Great. Yeah, fantastic point. So, next, share a little bit about how you will be unique. Now, this doesn't mean that you'll have a unique goal. Again, I don't value unique goals at all. But how will you leave your mark? So if you want to write that you are going into investment banking or you're going into management consulting, guess what? You could spend 200 words writing about consulting, and that's helpful, but anyone reading the application will know what consulting is already. So what's more important is, what are you going to do as a consultant? And why is a firm going to accept you versus someone else? Think about this as an advanced interview for that consulting job. Firms know that MBA students are all smart, and especially if you go to a top school, a company like McKinsey could hire, any of the 900 kids at Harvard. So why you? Why you over someone else? Maybe think about the focus that you want to have. Talk about your vision. You can mention how you're going to improve the future field that you're in, and then again, as MJ was alluding to, kind of connect what you've done in the past to this goal to some extent, so that if you write the goal and 5 of your friends write the goal, it's clear what the difference might be for you and your path versus what some other people might be talking about. And then passion, right? Try to articulate your passion. A strong career goals essay will communicate that passion, and it's easy to tell if something's not really passionate as you're reading something. Like what drove you to this field? We had a client a few years ago who is at MIT now and was in consulting beforehand, wrote about healthcare in all of his essays. It was a bit of a back and forth discussion because at first I wasn't convinced, and he was paying us. I still wasn't that convinced, and we had to come to a really personal reason that at first I didn't actually know about a family experience trying to get an experimental drug, and needed to figure out what you needed to do to get there. I'll stop there. It's confidential, but the point is that there was something in his life that said, look, I'm going to do healthcare. Even though we didn't really have tons of healthcare experience, we didn't study medicine or healthcare in undergrad, we didn't really volunteer for any healthcare nonprofits. Personally, that was his passion, and it became his passion very, very close to when he was submitting his applications, and that's where there was a little bit of a discussion. But it ended up working out really well. He brought some of these family reasons into the goals, and it turns out quite well for him. So the other thing that you can do is talk about any innovations or trends that you're interested in or intrigued by. Sometimes Harvard Business School asks some certain unique questions, and without giving too much away in terms of what they do in their interview prep, sometimes they might ask questions like, tell me what company you admire in your industry. Tell me what are some innovations that you see that are going well. What's a role that you wouldn't want to take in this space? Be ready to answer some of these types of questions. And if you sit down there and you say, it might be kind of obvious that you didn't actually do your homework. So where do your goals fit into your applications? It depends on the school, but essays, they could come in short answer questions. So if a school like Kellogg doesn't directly ask about the goals in the essays, they do ask about it in the short answer questions and in their video essays. So actually hit both of them, and certainly in the interviews. Most schools will ask about goals in interviews. So those are the different places that they could come into consideration. Some common goals essays. So Wharton, one of my favorite ones, what do you hope to gain professionally from the Wharton MBA? Booth, how will the Booth MBA help you achieve your immediate and long-term post-MBA career goals? And then, Columbia asked, what's your path over the next 3 to 5 years? And what in your imagination is your long-term dream job? But again, even though they say long-term dream job, we don't mean this random pie in the sky, I'm going to save the world type of thing, when otherwise in the short term, you're doing marketing strategy for a soda company or something. So even though with the dream, you still want to bring it back to reality. So these are some questions. I don't think any of these questions will change. You can probably get started for fall on these, but in any case, these were asked in previous years. So how to answer these goals questions? Ensure the goals are specific and ownable. We talked about specificity with goals earlier. Ownable really ties to your background and what you've done before. So tie things together. It's very easy to do this. You can think about certain skill sets that you have from your work, things that you've done in the past, and what makes a goal a realistic goal for you. Of course, think about short-term and long-term goals. But if a school only asks about short-term, then only answer short-term. Some schools are not caring as much about long-term goals. Discuss skills you will gain during an MBA and how you will apply them to the goals. Sometimes this is better done than others, and I'll let MJ weigh on this in a second. And also, talk about some programs and classes on campus. So if you are answering one of these questions, you want to say what you're doing and then what the school will do to help you to actually get there. Without giving away too much, MJ, what are like a couple pitfalls, a couple silly things you see people doing when they're talking about maybe some classes that they want to take in order to accomplish their goals?
I think sometimes when people give a laundry list of things, and it's like you can tell that they lifted it right off the website, and then you're left wondering how much people have thought through it. You're better off giving one or two examples with a little bit of explanation as to why you're interested in that. Like if there's a particular professor you like, why you like him, why you think his course in X or Y will be good for you. So it's more a matter of giving insight and perspective around what that is that you're going to gain, as opposed to just showing you've done extensive research.
Yeah, great point. It's very, very, very easy to tell if we're just pasting things in. So last year, our clients got into all the top schools. This is a sample of some of them, and with lots of scholarship dollars. It ended up being, the number offhand, well over 100,000 per person on average. So a little bit more about how we can help you, our personal MBA coach, and then we'll take any and all questions that you have at the end, and we'll stop presenting so we can see the questions. We talked a little bit about tutoring, beforehand. We do brainstorming, figure out what your story development is. We'll help you with school selection. What are the right schools based on your personality, profile, the chances of getting in, resume editing. As a lot of the work that we do is essays. We have sample essays. We'll help you to think through how to structure your arguments, key points to include. We'll help you through letters of recommendation. And then we have former interviewers across a number of top schools. This is a very high-level view. We go into a lot more depth with folks if they're interested in exploring working with us, and that way we can really go into some of the unique things that we offer. If you are interested in talking further, contact information is on the bottom, so feel free to reach out. The website is great. You can jump on the website, read a little bit about our services and packages, and then submit an inquiry. You can send an email to scott@personalmbacoach.com. And here's a Kickstart guide if you'd like. This is also on our homepage, as well as some other videos and downloadables. And of course, you'll be subscribing to the GMAT Club YouTube channel as I requested earlier, so you can see some of our other videos there. But this guide allows you to think through what are the things that you should be doing between now and when you're applying. Everyone is starting the process now, even if you're applying in round 3 or round 1. And so this gives you some tips. So it's personalmbacoach.com/Kickstart sign up. And now we'll stop sharing and we will go to questions.
Yeah, we're starting to get a few. I think the first one is from Mohammed.
Okay, great. Yeah, so how will someone with a law background can break into finance? Yeah, MJ, maybe I'll toss it over to you. What have you seen with this happening?
So an MBA and finance in particular can be a great complement to law. I think the question is, have you had any prior academic coursework in finance so that you understand what it's about? Or has anything that you've done in the legal field had you involved in any financial aspect? Sometimes legal partners will work with businesses on setting up businesses, working on financial instruments. So the key is to be able to articulate any connection that you have in any understanding. So it's not that, oh, I have a law degree, now I want to do finance. If you can connect the two in any way, and usually there is some way, because the two are obviously interrelated and overlap quite a bit, or can.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so next, I've been working for over 5 years in small MNC and operations. I want to do an MBA to get an advancement in the career, but not very sure about the future goals. How do I research and decide? Yes, I'll take this question. I think the first thing you can do is talk with other students. I really believe students are great to talk to, and to protect, all of MJ's friends. Don't reach out to admissions directors and just ask them countless and countless questions. Use students, use alumni, and ask them about their experiences. You can get on LinkedIn. You can research what people are doing. Also, a lot of schools have different club websites, and maybe like the finance club or the consulting club. Reach out and chat with them and see what might be realistic. There are a lot of different things that you can do coming from operations, and offline, obviously, we can help you to think in a lot more detail, but those are a few places that you can start with. Which top B schools have a demonstrated commitment to social entrepreneurship and development? So I'll mention a couple on my mind, and then MJ, feel free to add anything if you're thinking of any. So first of all, a lot of schools can help you with social entrepreneurship and development. There are certain schools that are a little bit more well known, like Yale School of Management is pretty good. Although truthfully, I thought Wharton had a lot in the social space, even though it's not what they're maybe well known for. Oxford Shade is another one that comes to mind. What are some other ones, MJ, that you might direct folks to think through?
Well, to pivot just a little bit, I think the way you can really find out, because there is a lot of stuff out there that is not always real accurate, is look at what kinds of activities or clubs that a school has related to that area. Look and see what kind of jobs people are being placed in that area. Because it's such a popular field, a lot of schools will say that they're interested in it, and they will, but the degree and depth of their involvement can vary depending on the school and the size. So I'd say that's a good way to start. And again, to your point, Scott, connect with some of the student ambassadors at the school and ask them. They will be very candid with you about what they see and how involved it is.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I'm a civil engineer. I've been working in infrastructure industry in various roles, from project management to business development. How should I articulate a career goal for consulting? So I'll take this one. I think that you have a great background for consulting. Perhaps you are interested in working with different companies across a variety of industries. If you're working in infrastructure, then you can go to some shops that specialize a little bit more in development or infrastructure consulting. Something like business development and project management. These are things that consultants need to be good at, and so I would kind of talk about your technical expertise. Technical expertise, and engineers tend to do well in consulting, because you can analyze a problem, you can break it up into its component parts, and then help to design a solution. And so what you want to do is really take that skill set and learn how to communicate with perhaps more senior executives, and figure out how you can drive change for organizations. So off the top of my head, that's what I would say, but certainly we could go into more depth as well. And we have former consultants. I mean, I'm a former consultant, but we have former consultants from McKinsey, Bain, and a couple other top firms to help with consulting career prep. And so part of this is what you want to do for the MBA application, and then part of it is how to actually land a job. Okay, I have a keen interest in cryptocurrency. Given this is a relatively new field, should I elaborate on this interest in my goals, or should I stick to more traditional goals? Yeah, so my best friend, who's currently not working, emailed me many years ago. I forget, it was a long time ago, and I still have the email. get in on this thing, this Bitcoin thing. It was $100 a coin. And I'm thinking, why am I throwing away $100 on some random coin that I didn't understand? And he's not working now, so that's the end of that story. So, should you elaborate on this in your goals or six? So MJ, I'll let you answer that. How would you analyze this?
If you can explain it in a way that makes it sound thoughtful and informed, then I think it's a fine goal. What you want to steer away from is, oh, I'm on this craze and everybody's doing it, so I'm trying to ride the bandwagon. So if you can explain why that makes sense from a career perspective and you can put some teeth behind it, then it's a fine goal. And obviously your passion will appear when you write about it or you interview. So the key is to make it look like you're not just finding the most current trend and trying to wag the tail on it.
Yeah, exactly. And don't worry if your goal is a little bit different. I mean, we have people that talk about, going into like the marijuana industry and they think maybe that's not an acceptable goal. If that's a goal for you and that's something that makes sense, it certainly could be reasonable.
Yeah, and cryptocurrency is gaining a lot of traction. I mean, even if you've heard what's going on with coronavirus, they were talking about some sort of US cryptocurrency. So it's gaining a lot of credibility, or at least a lot of traction. So it's not going to be a negative for you.
So if my primary goal is to move and immigrate to another country like Canada, will I mention it to admissions officers or just keep it to myself? So I'll answer and then I'll let MJ jump in case the answer is any different. I would say mention it. Yeah. I mean, just be honest and talk about what you want to do. Not everyone stays in the city that the school's in. Not everyone stays in the country. Schools know that, especially if you're, well, I guess if you're immigrating, then maybe that's different. But wherever you want to go, I think it's reasonable. The one thing to keep in mind is you want to be able to accomplish this goal. So if you're going to school in Singapore, and then you say, I want to move to, France after that, and that's a new city, a new country, they might wonder, can you actually accomplish this, and will you be able to be recruited, and will you be able to get a job? So as long as you have a plan in place and you can articulate that, I think that's reasonable. What do you think, MJ?
Well, a couple of things come to mind. The first thing is make sure you have a reason to be going there, not a reason to be leaving where you are from. And then the second thing is tie that to your career goals. If you really want to move to another country like Canada, you may need to be sponsored, in which case you'll probably need a big company or a consulting firm or something that has the resources to sponsor you and is familiar with the process and willing to do it. If you say that you want to move to Canada and start your own business or work for a small firm, then it may not be as practical or realistic. So again, tie it to your goals. Have a reason that you want to be in Canada. It's not that you're trying to run away from your country for whatever reason. And sometimes there are good reasons, but that's not sufficient.
Great point. A lot of people might want to run away, but that's a different conversation. Many schools, great. I thought we would get this question about round 3. We're doing a lot of work with round 3 now. Many schools have extended their round 3 deadlines or added additional rounds in response to the coronavirus situation. Whether it's worth applying, wonder whether it's worth applying the extended round rather than round 1 next year. Absolutely. For most schools, I'd say for all schools that are extending their deadlines, they're doing it for a reason, right? And just to take a step back, for those of you who are not familiar with this and haven't read a lot of the literature, although my guess is a lot of you have, if you're on here, there's a lot of uncertainty that's happening. There are certain people that will just decide they don't want to leave their job to go to get an MBA, and so they'll drop out and not come in the fall. And then there are a lot of international applicants that unfortunately might not be able to get visas in time to come to the U.S. or other countries to start their MBA. And we hope they can, but in case they cannot, that means that certain spots could open up for other people who don't have these restrictions. Because of that, we're seeing a lot of interest in round 3. Everyone that we worked with for a Wharton application in round 3 got invited to interview. The numbers were not huge. Round 3 is typically small. But we're seeing a lot of folks applying in round 3. And we believe, of course, this is, we're just believing, that it will be easier to get in now than it will be in the fall. The other thing that's happening is there's a recession, if you haven't heard. And, during recession, more people are looking to apply. So, we had 2 people that we heard from a personal MBA coach today and had calls with who were talking to us because either they lost their job or they were furloughed. And in most days it would be 0. So you're seeing more people that will be applying over the summer and more people that will be deferred. Thus, round 1 will be competitive. If you can apply now, I think it's beneficial. What percentage of the class at top these schools are from non-conventional students? I'll toss this to you, MJ.
Thanks. I think it varies. Schools don't really have exact quotas, but what I can say is that if you are a non-conventional or non-traditional student, you can actually be very attractive because you're going to offer a really unique perspective in the classroom. And because there are no quotas, you have to have a strong application, right? So all things being equal, you're applying with maybe someone who has a finance background, very standard profile, standard academic background, and you're comparable with them academically, but you have more non-traditional background. Sometimes that can be enough to differentiate you, which we've talked a little bit about so far is, how do you distinguish yourself? Sometimes you just distinguish yourself because you've done something different, or you're more thoughtful, or you express yourself better. So there's not a target number, but you're very welcome at MBA programs, and there's always usually somebody on the admissions committee who likes to champion non-conventional students.
Yeah, we love non-traditional applicants. We love them. We have 3 people this year that are either performers or work for a performing company, I guess, let's say. So some really not traditional folks. Okay, Tom, again, thanks for coming back for another question. Will MBA programs allow waiving of GMAT for round 1? Then we'll just take the traditional GMAT when testing centers will open, or would you suggest taking the online GMAT after round 1? Yeah, it's a good question. So, I mean, the honest answer is we don't know. I'll weigh in, and I'll let MJ weigh in as well. I mean, we don't really know. Right now, the online GMAT is offered a maximum of 1 time, which might not be enough for people that are looking to apply in round 1 and might need multiple attempts. It was created as a way to allow people to take a test now if they need to submit in the next few months. The idea is centers will open and people will be able to take tests then, but we don't know. I mean, if they don't open, and they in some markets they certainly might not open before September. Maybe the online GMAT is going to be able to be allowed to be taken more than once. This does not come from GMAT. This is my own thinking, I guess my hopes. And I've asked and they've said no, it's only 1 time so far. But I would take the online test because look, what's going to happen is if you don't do well, nobody cares. It's an online test. Everyone knows it's not a real thing, and they'll look at the highest score anyway. So I don't think there's any downside to taking the test online now. MJ, how would you think about this kind of online now versus maybe waiting for centers to potentially open up later?
Yeah, I don't think there's a downside. And I think especially if you're like a non-conventional student, or if you don't have a lot of quantitative courses in your background, it's an opportunity to demonstrate your ability to handle that aspect of an MBA program. So I don't think there's a downside. And then
yeah, and I realized I didn't directly answer the question of waiving in round 1. I think it's still April, almost May though, surprisingly. We just don't know. I mean, it's certainly possible, right? Kellogg waived the GMAT for round 3. If the situation doesn't change, will they waive it for round 1? I mean, it's certainly possible. We haven't heard of most schools considering that though. But then again, this is a new time. So this kind of keeps things exciting for us. So we'll see. Come back to the next video in another month or 2, and we'll have a little bit more information. And I'll also be meeting with all the admissions directors at the AGAT conference, the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants. Be meeting with them in the next few weeks, and we'll be talking a lot about coronavirus. So I'll have a lot more information come May 20th, and maybe we'll have some more answers then. Okay, what would be the likelihood of students being accepted into top MBA schools with experience in science laboratory research to healthcare consulting / drug development? MJ, maybe I'll let you talk about that. I mean, my quick thought is I think if the experience is great and strong, then you could make a great student. But I don't know if you can talk to likelihood at all, MJ, here.
I think schools are very open to it. What is really helpful is if you've had any exposure to leading projects or working on cross-functional teams or things that would show that you understand something beyond just doing laboratory research, that you understand maybe its connection to business processes or the ROI of the business. And certainly you can demonstrate that in an interview and essays. But understanding the research that underpins healthcare could actually make you a real asset in consulting, because then you're not just a generalist, but you also understand a lot of the technical aspects of what it is that you're advising on.
Okay, so working in strategy and finance in tech, I want an MBA to expand my scope in strategy. Long-term goals, product strategy related role in tech. Will schools challenge why I need the MBA versus working to get there? I don't think so. No, it's not that common for schools, and MJ will correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not that common for schools to challenge an applicant for why they need an MBA. The MBA can allow you to do a lot in your career, and it definitely happens. I mean, it definitely happens where we say, look, this doesn't make sense. It doesn't seem like it's the right path for you. But I feel like from what I'm seeing, the MBA could absolutely help you to be more successful in product strategy. You could lead product strategy teams, manage other folks. So I don't think that you'd be challenged here.
I agree with you, Scott. And I think the value of an MBA is it gives you broad exposure to all areas of business. And if you look at people's careers, the most successful ones tend to be the people who are conversant across areas. Like, you may not be the accountant, but you know the language to be able to talk with the accountant. You may not be the CFO, but you know how to communicate to the CFO. And so in a project strategy role, if you understand the different functions, you understand how strategy ties in to the different functional areas. So in many ways, an MBA makes perfect sense.
Great, thank you. Okay. Great. Well, I think that was all the. We'll wait another minute or so in case anyone has other questions. So it looks like we're all done here. So yeah. So I'll give some closing remarks. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Really appreciate everything. We're redoing the office here, so there's no pictures on the wall or things like that. But really appreciate it. If you have any other questions or thoughts, want to chat with MJ, talk about working with one of us. Feel free to reach out. So best way is to jump on the website, personalmbacoach.com. And so actually it looks like we have one last question here from Mohammed. I'm running a startup, so need financial skills. Also would be appearing for CFA level. Also my interest lies in finance. So I think it's asking about CFA. So I think I'm understanding the question. CFA is great. CFA is definitely a positive thing in an application, and it demonstrates your commitment, to the financial space, and it also shows that you can handle some tough rigor. If that's not the question you're asking, then feel free to, reach back out. But yeah, thanks so much everyone for logging on and for watching. Again, subscribe to GMAT Club's YouTube channel. Visit our website, personalmbacoach.com, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.
It's nice to meet you all.
And most importantly, stay safe. Stay inside and stay safe.